financial and economic issues that affect our everyday lives. Today, yes, is the 10th day in the month of January 2024. Thank you for joining me. My name is Chioma Ezenwafo. So how are you handling this post-festive business landscape? I've been speaking a lot of this English, like someone told me, but really that's the best way to just put it all together. There is an afterlife, life after the festive season, even though, like we talked about last week, there's so much that people did during the festive season. They spent like there's no tomorrow. But now you'd see that there is actually a tomorrow, and you have a business landscape to navigate if you're a business owner, if you're running your own business, or even working for someone's, doing someone's business for them. There is a post-festive business landscape to navigate. How are you handling it? Some people say January is slow. January is slow. Is it? Is there a way, now that the holiday is over, what are you doing to get your business back on track? I would like to hear your thoughts. Of course, if you have game-changing ideas that you're using to navigate the post-festive business landscape, I would like to hear it. We're live on Facebook and YouTube at Nigeria Info PH, so drop your comments there. I'll read them live in a bit. Yes, you can also share your thoughts on X, that's former Twitter, at Nigeria Info PH. And of course, drop your comments at 0809-030-6416. That's the WhatsApp number. That's 0809-030-6416. And I like to always start with the comments, and when it's time to open the phone lines, I'll read your comments on those platforms as well. My guest on the show has a wealth of knowledge on how best to handle these times, these times that some people find it, challenging to start again because they've eaten every kobo. They've eaten the isiego and the uru. You know what I mean? They've eaten both their capital and everything, and starting can be challenging. If that's you, this is a good show for you to start. It's a good time and a good show for you to get close and call a friend to tell a friend, because we're going to have such conversations today. I'll introduce you to the guest in a bit. But first, let's dive right into Market Watch to bring you the latest insights that matter. Yes, a look at the big stories in the world of business before we go into the very topic of the day. Yes, my guest here in the studio is Associate Professor of Monetary Economics, Professor Peter Medee, or Dr. Peter Medee is with me in the studio. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Yes, Associate Professor of Monetary Economics. I am so happy to have you here because we're going to be breaking down some of these top stories before we delve into the topic of the day. And we're starting with this one. The Rivers State government just said today that the issues of unemployment would reduce as many companies are expected to return to the state. That's a lot of promises, considering that Rivers State has been topping the list of the states with a high rate of unemployment. Where do we begin for something like this? What's the possibility of this promise?
It's very, very possible.
Really?
It's very possible. A situation where you have a committed and a dedicated government that people can take seriously, then when such statement is made, you can be sure that that will be achieved. In December, this government said they were going to pay 100,000 to workers. And in a week or thereabout, the payment commenced, and before the Xmas season was over, almost all workers in the state received their Christmas bonus.
That's
a serious government.
Okay.
A government that says a word and it's done. Not a government that will say will employ 5,000 workers, it will not be employed. Will promote workers, they will not promote. Will pay gratuity, they will not pay. A government said we are going to pay this, and in a week everybody receives that.
So you're saying that we're going to be seeing words matched with action?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
Because when you see a serious government and a committed government, that government needs to be taken seriously. And it is very easy to do that. What does it take to do that? Just direct government policies that key sectors that are labor intensive. And once you do that, and there is friendly policies, there is ease of doing business, you begin to see investment. People will begin to come. People are sure that they are going to receive their return on investment because it is a committed government. Government of Similaris Fubara, Governor Siminalayi Fubara is a serious government. And so people are taking him seriously. And because of that, I'm very, very sure a lot of investment is going to be attracted to the state. And once that is done, and you also know that he is also dedicated and committed to target sectors that are labor intensive, like agri sector.
Okay.
All that are areas where jobs can be created. You know, the previous government targeted infrastructure. That just looking at hire workers to build a flyover and build this, and they go back.
It wasn't sustainable.
And it wasn't sustainable. Now, this government is climbing on that now to begin to target key sectors that are labor intensive. And so once you see,
like, what kind of sectors do you see this government targeting?
For example, the agri sector.
Okay, we're going to see this government target the agri sector.
The agri sector.
Okay, because last year, when we did our review for the year, we noticed that agriculture was completely neglected. So if agriculture is going to prioritize this year, that's really a good thing.
Yes, you know, the governor paid a visit to the Songhai Farm Initiative. That initiative in Thai local government is one area that a lot of jobs can be created, not just directly on the Songhai farm, but there are all production chain, a lot of activities that will follow that investment.
Okay.
All that area that a lot will be attracted. And also the government is also looking at a lot of deliberate policies that can attract foreign direct investment.
So don't worry, it's not the topic of the day. We're just looking at the story. I like that you have so much to say when it comes to this government and their plan when it comes to reducing unemployment in Rivers State, because we've been there for too long. And I look forward to it, especially for Songhai. I cannot wait to see whether it's going to be handed over to a private sector to handle or the government is going to manage it themselves. I cannot wait to see how that unfolds. And that brings me to the next story here. The National Bureau of Statistics talking about the increase in air travel. But before we go to that one, they have this one, Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, saying or warning that the consequences of massive job losses across sectors, and those consequences will continue to create insecurity and increase child labor and among others. Of course, the data has always shown that a lot of people lost their jobs or they continue to lose their jobs, and now this association is warning that if this continues, it's going to have other implications. While we understand, like you just talked about, Rivers State government doing it, of course, Rivers State exists in Nigeria, and we cannot, we all are together. What do you think must be done, by all the authorities involved to ensure that we do not see this situation, like what they are warning us about, the consequences of the massive job losses?
That's the association that is responsible or organizes all employers in Nigeria.
Yes.
They are the opposite of the Nigerian Labour Congress. So why the Nigerian Labour Congress has to do with employees, they deal with employers.
They're actually the ones firing people.
So they are the people actually firing people.
Yes.
And they are firing people because of very harsh economic environment occasioned by shock, both internal shock and external shock. And what are shocks? These are economic disturbances targeted at an economy, maybe from the external economy, if it is external shock. Then if it is internal shock as a result of some policy in some part of the economy or some other sectors in the economy. For example, in Nigeria last year, we had issues that led to internal shock. Number one, the Naira redesigning policy brought a lot of shock in terms of the supply of the currency. We also saw the taking away of subsidy, which also was part of the internal shock. We also saw a very harsh exchange rate policy where exchange rate were completely floated, and so that made the exchange rate for the Naira projected very high. That's also internal shock. Then you also look at externally. We had the war in Ukraine. We had the war in Israel and Hamas. All that transmitted economic disturbances to Nigeria.
And some of the things you're just mentioning now.
Economic disturbances within Nigeria.
Yes.
So all those actually made the environment in Nigeria, economic environment, to be very, very harsh. And so as employers, they've seen situation where they try to employ, to produce. They produce. What they produce, people are not buying. Or they couldn't produce as a result of high cost of productivity, or high cost of production. Power, which is energy, You know what happened when subsidy was removed.
Yeah.
So all that led to high cost of production. So when cost of production increases while return on investment is low, you see that you have two options, either to downside or to increase production. And if you cannot increase, the only option open to you is to downside. And so maybe that's why they are saying so.
Downsizing. It's okay. Well, you know what? All the things you mentioned as the reason for us to be here at this moment are still ongoing. Wars are still ongoing. The forex crisis is still ongoing. Inflation as well. Removal of subsidy is not making anything any better, and there isn't any end in sight at the moment.
Well, I think there's likely going to be an end in sight, but that has to do with strengthening institutions. You know, there are institutions that are responsible for implementing government policy. And so if these institutions are strong, then people will take them seriously.
Like which one now?
Yeah.
NMPC is not a institution anymore.
NMPC is also one.
But it's not privatized. So.
Yes, even if it's privatized, government grip on it is still very high.
Okay.
So they also need to do more in terms of the distribution of fuel and all other power-related products.
Okay.
Also, the power sector also need to do more in terms of generation, transmission, and distribution of power. All that would seem to reduce cost of production. And once cost of production is reduced, then profit is going to be high. And when profit is high, people can actually begin to produce more. And an attempt to produce more would require that you employ more. Because employment is a variable factor. So when you have a fixed factor, if you increase the variable factor, when there is prospect for return on investment, then you are likely to get more profit. And profit is a signal. So once they see that there's a signal in profit in terms of producing more, then they will employ more. But if the reverse is the case, then they would downside.
All right, and that's really clearly stated there. Now, for final story on this segment, Market Watch, we're looking at the National Bureau of Statistics. I mentioned it earlier. The cost of air travel increased by 11.01% in November 2023 compared to the same period in 2022. I mean, this is something that we've seen happen. I saw a report, we mentioned it here on the show some time back, that the aviation sector, the hit they took during the COVID-19, they are yet to actually recover. That's what the report said. And we see the airfares really increasing. We saw ridiculous prices in December. Do you think they are going to get any better?
Well, they may likely get better because, you see, the factors you are mentioning now could actually not be the immediate cost of the present hike in price of transport fare in terms of air transport. But I think the major trouble was insecurity. Because of insecurity, a lot of people now demanded for air travel rather than to travel by road. The roads are bad, insecurity is bad. So when you compare that in terms of the cost of buying fuel, which also increased, then if you want to fly to Lagos and then taking road, which will take you about 6-7 hours, you are going to pay 40,000. Then flying in the air, you are going to pay 50,000. You can see.
More.
No, I'm saying
double.
for example.
Okay.
I'm saying for example. Then you see people will begin to demand more for air travel. And so when the demand for air travel has increased, what will happen to price? Price will increase. So now the operators begin to play on the intelligence of people because the more people demanding for air, and they keep the ticket floating. So the more people, the more the price begin to increase. You can also believe with me that within the same period, some flight tickets were about 6,000. Some flight tickets were 55,000. But some flight tickets were also 120,000. That's because of the interplay of demand and supply, the forces of demand and supply. That's market forces at work. But that was enhanced by insecurity. Nobody will want to risk to travel by road to be kidnapped. Nobody will also need to travel by a bad road so that a journey you are expected to take 6 hours, you end up doing 10 hours. So in that case, people want to fly. And then because you're sure that in 45 minutes you'll be in Lagos, you'll be in Abuja. So why do you want to risk the road? So
I also know that.
That now induce a lot of demand for air travel. And once demand increases, the price.
Yes, we saw that happen. But I also know that air travelers complained a lot about empty airline, and the airplanes are empty, and like 3-4
Yes,
people.
because
So they would rather fly empty.
yeah, so because when the price is more high than people can afford, then people need to switch. Some people now made up their mind not to travel again.
Yes, that's actually what we saw.
And you also know that the aviation industry is being operated by very few airlines. So which means supply of transport is fixed in the face of higher demand.
Okay.
And so when the demand is so high, the price now begins to increase, and the price got to a level to which traveling by air were crowded out. So people didn't want to travel again, and people say, instead of me to travel, I stay back after 3-4 days. And that was exactly what happened.
Okay, we're going to go on a break in a bit, but first let's look at the final story on Market Watch. Let's look at you mentioned it's actually in the news, talking about the passport application process that's been started by the Nigerian Immigration Service. You've said a lot actually. If you listen to our news, you know that Dr. Medee has said a lot about what that can bring for us. What else do you see with this, going online that you can now do it from the comfort of your home? What else do you see that can portend with all that we've seen happen in Nigeria, especially when it comes to immigration and all the racketeering that's been going on when it comes to passport application process?
First and foremost, the racketeering will go down. Because if you don't see people queue up in the passport office, you won't see who to play around with in terms of to extort money from. So the opportunity for people to extort money will go down. Two, the other very important issue is man-hour. The man-hour people lost queuing up in that office to be able to obtain passport for 3-4 days and not yet return is going to go down. It means that instead of going to the passport office to queue, you will not stay in your office to work. And if it is an economy where working is giving return on labor, then it means that output will increase because people will now stay back in their office to do more instead of going to queue in an office. So I think that's very key. And that will also bring to ease of doing business. So ease of doing business is strengthen and increase. That will attract more people to come do business with us.
Okay.
And passport has to do with an internationally related transaction because nobody wants to secure international passport to stay in Nigeria or to be in Nigeria. If I want to move from here to Lagos, I don't need an international passport. I only need an international passport if I have an internationally related transaction. And so that is going to strengthen and increase commerce.
Oh, interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Medee. And that's it for Markets Watch. And I hope you make something with the information, all the analysis when it comes to the business stories and all that's going on in the business world. And so we'll be back, and Inside That Tips is up next. Welcome back. It's time for Inside the Tips. And of course, the Associate Professor of Monetary Economics is here with me, Dr. Peter Medee. And we're going to be talking about the way we can ensure that you start strong as a business owner or as a creative, as an entrepreneur. The question of whether or not it is that January can be slow, after the festive season and all the shopping habits that we saw during the festive season. Does it have to drop in January? Is there something that we can do to help? And how are you handling, this post-holiday, post-holiday period? How are you handling it? How has it been for you? I know that people in the back to school supply and people in school, I must call it school business at this point. I know that there's a lot of money movement in that sector at the moment. But how about others? Where does that leave the fashion people and the people that we saw that were on top of the festivities last month? We'd like to know your thoughts. We're live on Facebook and YouTube at Nigeria Info PH. So drop your comments there and we'll read them live on there. We know that you also know that you can drop your messages on WhatsApp at 0809-030-6416. That's where you can drop your comments. And it's still very, some people, like they said, they are yet to get back to business. Some people have, but they say business is slow. Actually, I have some messages on Facebook and some people are saying, that you have to spend, whether you like it or not. Spending habits do not exactly drop. you still have to put some things in place as a business owner for you to be able to get get those customers or get the spirit going. And that's also why I was asking, is there a way to keep that momentum that was built during the festive season? Is there a way to keep it even in January, perhaps all through the year? Yes, Associate Professor of Monetary Economics is here in the studio with me, and the question is: how are shifting consumer behavior post-festive season affecting your business? What game-changing ideas are you using to navigate this season? Should it be over? I cannot wait. I cannot help but remember Dubai, for instance, where when you go there, it's almost like there's a festivity all the time. So is there a way that we can bring in what they do, whatever that makes it work for them that way, and for it to also start working in Nigeria that way? That's a conversation today, and you can be a part of it. All right, phone lines will be open in a bit, but first, my guest, I have some questions. Of course, you've heard me say he's Associate Professor of Economics. He's also the head of the Department of Economics at the University of Port Harcourt. So he's got a wealth of knowledge to share with us today. And so, Prof, thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me today.
So let's start with the current economic trends. I've mentioned a bit of it, both globally and within here. As we start the new year, can you provide us with an overview of the current economic trend?
Well, if you listen to the initial question when we were doing review, I spoke about shock, both internal shock and external shock, and that gave a kind of pressure on the Nigerian economy. So we have the shock internally as it relates to the Naira redesignation policy, the fuel subsidy removal, the floating of the exchange rate. So all that put internal pressure on the economy. Then externally, we had the war both in Ukraine and also in Israel. Nigeria is more of an oil-dependent economy. So because the economy over-depends on oil, now anything that happens to other oil-related countries seem to affect us very well. So there was excessive economic disturbances transmitted to the Nigerian economy globally, both as it happened to other economy, and also affected us more because we are more of a dependent economy than the other oil producing countries who maybe have a lot of gateway to accommodate their shock. So we export the crude oil, we use the proceeds to import finished product. And these countries where we are expected to import this product from are some of the countries that are at war. So with the war in sight, production of crude oil was low and the price increased. Now, we sell the crude at a high price. Those who buy from us at a higher price use it to produce, and because they bought from us at a higher price,
they will also sell.
They turn back to sell to us at a more higher price. So that has taken the price of these products, which is more of a stable product in Nigeria. Because after food, the next thing we talk about here is energy. And so that affected the economy adversely. So the economy battled to survive. And there was a new government in place. A new government with policy somersaults also brought some situation. A situation where the previous government had their own policy they were looking at. This government came in and do away some of the policy and bring their own, and then keep some, and then there was policy mismatch. So this policy somersault and policy mismatch also impacted more and generated more hits on the Nigerian economy. So that's where we're coming from, and that's where we are here. So nobody should be surprised with the realities of what we're seeing. But is there hope? Yes, there is hope if this new government will be serious to be able to do appropriate mix of monetary and fiscal policy, especially the commercial policy that will be able to stabilize the economy. This time we shouldn't talk about growth. We should talk about how to stabilize it. Until we stabilize it, that's when we are going to grow. But if you want to now force in growth policies, then you will be able to serve more sectors more. What do I mean by that? There's a direct trade-off between unemployment and inflation. Over concentrated on dealing with inflation and ignored unemployment. because every policy put in place to solve on inflation will end up creating unemployment. So they didn't manage an appropriate mix of it to say, look, can we tolerate some level of unemployment while we are solving the inflation? Or can we tolerate some level of inflation and then solve our unemployment? So I didn't see that in the previous administration. They were hitting headlong with inflation, not minding what happened to unemployment. And the inflation they were dealing with is more of imported inflation, and all other policies are externally related in terms of the shock. I have expected them to deal with unemployment, which is our problem. What do we do to solve unemployment? Because so that we can tolerate some level of this inflation, and they didn't do that. So they did headlong to solve inflation,
and they
couldn't win the battle.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, we had stagflation, where as unemployment was increasing, inflation were also increasing. And the worst part of it is that misery index Nigerians were completely useless.
Now, interestingly, despite all of these economic realities, Nigerians had a good time during the festive season. Last week, we had a guest and we talked about how people's spending habits were off the roof. People spent and made sure they had a good time despite the economic, like what you just explained, economic realities that we've always seen and we talked about and, that is ever before us. And then we saw a shift in consumer behavior. The most prudent people became the spendthrifts during the festive season. How did this, how did it impact the economic landscape? What can you tell us? What did you see? Because we call it the festive economy. You mentioned it in the last show. You were supposed to actually be on that show, but you were not available. I understand. So maybe you can tell us now what you saw. How did you perceive the festive economy in Nigeria as we saw it?
Well, the festive economy we saw in Nigeria was a kind of money illusion. It was an illusion. Really? It's a situation where people are dying in hunger. And then, instead of you to deal with what you can eat, you still want to buy clothes. So that's an illusion. People were not dealing with the realities of their situation.
Money illusion. So you just forgot about their realities and said, let them eat now.
Yeah. And I don't know. I was also in the village. And I saw poverty dealing with people. People couldn't have food to eat. So while people couldn't have food to eat, some other people who were the middle class people were having more to eat and even to throw away. So that's the reality of it. So it was like an illusion. I felt so sad because income distribution is our problem. Because income in the economy is not evenly distributed. The poor are becoming poorer, while the rich are becoming richer. So the festive period, maybe changing consumer behavior you saw was in terms of the rich becoming richer, buying more. You see a situation where one person is buying a trailer load of rice to give to people, just to impress people.
So it was already designed to be short-lived.
Yes.
Unlike what we see in the UK, in the US, where they can actually have data. I was going to come to that.
Every day is Christmas. Every day is their Christmas because people are comfortable. There's income distribution. So income available is distributed evenly so that you see few people below the poverty line. Few people. Why more people are getting richer. So income is circulating well. The problem we have here is income distribution. The few are becoming richer while the generality of the other people are becoming poorer. So poverty increases more. I'm talking of poverty in terms of the ability to afford the basic necessity of life, in terms of food, clothes, and shelter. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about relative poverty, where the rich are becoming more richer. So because the other person gave 100 bags of rice, let me give 200 back. That kind of thing. What do you want to achieve? Meanwhile, there are people who need that money, that need just a cup of rice. And rice, one cup, they don't have. Meanwhile, you carry this 200 bag, give to some people. If you go to some people's houses now, they have about 80 bags of rice. There, while there are people that are looking for one cup to eat and they cannot find.
That's a very interesting one. Now, what initiatives or policies would you recommend for the government to support businesses in this new year? Because you've just talked about the fact that consumer behavior that we saw shifting in the festive season was short-lived. It was bound to fizzle out. We could not have sustained it until January because of the income distribution, like you said. That's a very interesting way to look at it. Now let's look at government. Last week we mentioned that the government had the guest had said that the government has a role to play to ensure that to help the festive economy, and we're not even exploring it enough, and can adopt at this time to support businesses in this new year for them to start strong.
Well, it depends. The problem with the Nigerian economy is we are neither here nor there. We are not capitalist. We are not communist. We're a mixed economy. To what extent are we more capitalist, and to what extent are we more communist? That's the reality.
I think we're more capitalist than economists. If you look at the policies of government,
they
swing both ways.
Ordinarily, if we are more capitalist, then businesses would have been allowed to operate and then own resources and allow market to allocate. Now, we see a situation where, because of this same cruel and undeveloped nature of our economy, these policies cannot trickle down well. So you also need government intervention. And government intervention now makes economy. Now, for government to intervene, you also need some policies that will be able to blend monetary policy and fiscal policy. So an appropriate mix of fiscal policy and monetary policy is what we need now to be able to get businesses. What I mean by that is, we need investment. We need production. So when the monetarists say money allocates resources, especially through the transmission mechanism, where if you increase money supply, that is to give incentives for people to borrow more because interest will be low. If interest is low, people borrow more. If people don't borrow more, even when the interest is low. So the rational expectation theory provided explanation for it, that you may decide to increase money supply to reduce interest rate for people to borrow more. What did people actually borrow more? But as they borrow, instead of them to invest it in the real sector, they borrow to marry, they borrow to throw parties, which is the case we are seeing in Nigeria. In that case, you will not be expected that you stimulate aggregate demand side by side with increase in productivity. So you end up only stimulate aggregate demand in the face of shortage of output. And that's why our inflation has been promoting very high and high. So we're looking at a situation where government will be serious in terms of getting an appropriate mix of not just monetary policy, but fiscal policy. And then the fiscal policy we're expecting is a situation where government will deliberately target some sectors, not target individuals. The fiscal policy we're seeing today is targeting individuals. Oh, we're going to pay 25,000. Oh, we're going to pay 30,000.
How about the transportation
I'm coming.
cost that they did?
I'm coming. Oh, we're going to do transportation costs. Oh, that does not make any meaning.
Slashing of...
It doesn't make any meaning. What I expected government to have done would have been use that money you want to subsidize transportation, to subsidize the cost of transportation. If you have subsidized the cost of transportation, you would have made more impact than say you want to subsidize just transportation. So
that's what I mean. During the festive season, the federal government reduced by 50%.
They reduced by 50%.
They worked with private transportation companies.
How many of the private transport companies implemented that the letter? How many? It was abused.
It was difficult to track.
It is even difficult to track. It's difficult to even implement it. So what I'm saying is that fiscal policy of government now should not target individuals. A situation where, look at what is happening in the Ministry of Humanitarian now, because they are targeting individuals to give 25,000. So they get more money, that more money were available to the minister to play with. And that's what we're seeing. Why don't you target sectors, key sectors of the economy?
Like which one?
Education.
Okay.
Agriculture.
Okay.
Manufacturing. Cost of manufacturing. The real sector of the economy. Not just the portfolio sector. Because more have been playing around in the portfolio sector rather than the real sector. It is only in the real sector that when you target fiscal policy, you end up creating jobs and also creating output.
Okay.
When you create jobs and stimulate aggregate demand, an increase in aggregate demand has available goods and services to buy, then price will be stable. So if we need a stable economy, then policies will be targeted at sectors, not at individuals, especially fiscal policy.
All right, it's time to open the phone lines. We've had Associate Professor Medee. He said a lot, and I would like to hear your thoughts at this time. The phone lines are now open. 0817-923-0002. And you can also call 0817-923-0003. The WhatsApp number remains 0809-030-6416. That's the WhatsApp number. Your thoughts. I would like to get your thoughts at this time. What is it that you find? What do you think of what the Associate Professor of Military Economy has said at this time? More importantly, how are you navigating this post-holiday business landscape? We've heard him say that, yes, even though we saw a lot of shifts in consumer behavior, people were buying more despite the economic situation, and people would leave food and buy clothes and all of that. It was obvious that it wasn't going to be sustainable because there's so much that wasn't put in place before all of that started. You've heard him say that. And so what do you think? Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, you're welcome to Talking Figures.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay. For every nation and a citizen to have robust economy, there are three major factors that are involved. Number one is conducive environment. A conducive environment simply means safe environment where people can freely go about transacting their businesses without any form of insecurity or movement interruption. Unfortunately, we don't have it here.
Okay.
Number two is industrialization. Industrialize all the nations, bringing up companies, foreign investors, and also empowering our local investors. That's to make everywhere to be successful and grow as people are employed, both men and women, graduates and undergraduates. Then, number three, constant energy. If there's no constant energy in a nation, the truth remains that businesses will die, just as we see them dying and collapsing. So the current in the country, we don't have constant energy for people to run their business. And then the worst was this removal of price subsidy that has made now every commodity in the country to go high by 300%. So, presently, people don't even have money. Since there's no constant energy, they don't have money to buy food to run their businesses. So, in fact, businesses are closed entirely here. So, if that they want this country and the businessmen and women to succeed, including government herself, then these are three factors must quickly get. If not, all the promises that have been made are just wasting of time. Promises in futility.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts there. And let's take another call before I'll come to you again, Dr. Medee. Hello, that's Godswill from Rumodara. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Costa. My greetings to your guests in the studio.
Okay.
I just listened to him and I'm a little kind of confused. I know usually it's easy for sometimes economists to come and want to dismiss everything the government is doing based on maybe their own knowledge. So when he says he would have expected the government to target the transport sector and not individuals, taking example of this last December subsidy the government ruled, and he kind of confused. Can he be critical on how the government can target the transport sector that would not plant individuals, because he's making it I don't feel it's okay to just see the reaction of government just because we feel we can speak all the grammars and make people feel as if the reaction of government is wrong. Let him be a little bit practical for me, please.
All right, Godswill, thank you for your thoughts there. Dr. Medee?
Yeah, thank you. Well, what we are saying, there are discussions that when you have professionals to talk about, we talk about it in terms of our training. And so if I said that fiscal policy of government to complement monetary policy should be targeted at sectors, a situation where you say, okay, I want to dash people 10,000, it's not sustainable. And there is often room for abuse. Now, you said you want to give 50% price off transportation. How many transport companies were targeted? How many received it? How many implemented it?
Okay.
That's what we are saying. It's very clear. So rather, it would have been just like government did. They say, okay, our train is free. And people driving the train free. It's targeted.
But the train is not owned by private sector now, it's owned by government.
That's what I'm saying. Now, if you want to target the private sector, you target exactly the business, not the. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, you target the business. Where do these get vehicle from? If you're able to go to Innocent Motors and then get 500 buses and distribute two buses to these people, then nobody will tell them to carry at the 50% rate you are about.
But let's
when you now say, okay, you will carry 50%. What if they did not carry the 50%? What if they carry 80%? What did they actually carry the 50%?
Hold on now, Dr. Medee. I remember that during the last administration that farmers were given fertilizers. Is that something like that you're expecting?
Fine.
Is it the Jonathan administration or the Buhari administration that did something like that, where they gave out fertilizers?
If you give out fertilizers,
was that sustainable? Because I know that has stopped. Did that help in any way?
That could also help, because if people get fertilizers to plant, when they get their yields, first, without fertilizers, if they are to harvest 100 tons, with fertilizers, they're likely to harvest 200 tons. And if they harvest 200 tons, then there's a 100% increase in production, in output. 100% increase in output. We have a lot to tell on the price than to say, oh, go to the market, cut price by 50%. It's not going to be possible, because the people knows that what they invested to get the output now is more. And for them to sell to get output, you cannot force them to sell at a lower price. So, but if you target the sector, you will make more impact in the economy. Yes, there may be lag between when the policy is given and when the outcome comes, but it will be sustainable than that you just target the people to say, okay, let me give 10,000 to each household. Okay.
Now, when we had this conversation about the festive economy last week, we saw that there's so much money was left on the table when it comes to advantage that both the government, individuals, and businesses would have opportunities that they would have hopped on, but they couldn't, either because of lack of capacity or both capacity for them and the environment to be able to harness it. And so when I think about right now, and we have about 11 months to see that kind of consumer shift again, what can we do to get us to that place where we know how to harness the opportunities of the festive economy, like what we see in Dubai? I mentioned it earlier that Dubai, all year round, people make plans.
Every day is Christmas.
Yes, all year round, people make plans. And they are an oil-producing country, and they plan themselves to that extent. And businesses, mostly Nigerians own the businesses in Dubai, and they're able to, like, I know people who, they go there to shop, to buy, they sell clothes, and they go there from the very moment you drop at the airport to where you will get accommodation, to where you will shop. A Nigerian, or the chain is massive. That's my point. How can we replicate that in Nigeria with all of what you just explained? How can we sustain that?
It's easier, like our friend who called said, enabling environment.
What should that look like?
When you provide an enabling environment that is peaceful and stable, then take, for example, look at Nigeria. Look at the Lagos economy. The Lagos economy is more closer to the Dubai economy you're talking about than the River State economy. Look at what is happening in River State.
True.
Every transition is a crisis in River State. Every political transition period. Why should it be so? You understand? So we need a stable political and economic environment so that people can invest their money with expectation of high return on investment. When you see that happen with more businesses, more people will employ. As you employ more people, you pay more people. As you pay more people will now begin to have opportunities now to begin to shop and to be able to do every buying and selling. They will not just wait for December. For example, you see where people save from January to December, small, with the hope to buy things in December. But if such person is employed and is paid well, he does not need for December to buy clothes. He does not need for December to buy rice. People in the village eat rice in December. As more people, they take garri in the morning, garri in the afternoon, garri in the evening. If 2 persons from that family gets good jobs, they will be buying rice every day and people will be eating rice. They will not wait for December to buy rice. That's what we are saying. So what is important is that the economy must be stimulated with spending, especially targeted at key sectors that will not only create jobs and employ more people, but will also produce more goods and services, so that as they create jobs, they are also buying goods and services. Also, we also need an aggressive commercial policy. I'm talking about trade policy. A situation where Nigeria becomes dumping ground in terms of every product from everywhere is thrown at Nigeria. It's thrown at Nigeria. Then, if you have somebody who want to invest here to produce the same thing, you invest at a higher cost, you produce, your price is now high. Then somebody will produce in China with a lower cost and throw it down here. Then your product cannot go through the market. So those our infant industry here needs to be protected by appropriate trade policy.
How about lack of data? Last week, I must keep going back to what we talked about last week. We realize that there's so much data available when it comes to the UK and when it comes to the US, but when it comes to Nigeria, there is no data. You know, how much exactly was spent during the festive season? We cannot tell. We do not know. Why is that affecting us, you know, with what I just talked about, and how can we go forward from there?
That is the same illusion I'm talking about. You see, we must realize that we're a developing economy. Okay. Then you are talking about a developed economy. There's distinction between it. Here is an underdeveloped setting. So we must be able to implement our policy with the realities of our situation in planning. Not looking at this other developed economy, this other developed. For example, you have an ATM here, you have a POS here. It's there, but because there's constant power there, the POS cannot run out of battery, cannot run out of power. But here you want to go and pay, they tell you they need to power the POS because there was no light last night to enable them power it. So you can see the realities of it. What we are saying in essence is that we must develop at our own pace. We must put our policy with having the realities of our situation in mind. Yes, incomplete information is a problem. So we may not be able to get data. The kind of data we get here are data that are either manipulated or are only speculated. But to get the real data that will enable us plan is a major problem. I agree. It's a major problem. The data you see here is either manipulated or inflated in terms of one advantage or the other. People still feel that, if they want to do census, it's only when we increase our figure that they will say we have more voting strength. It is only when we have more voting strength that they will give us more word. Will give us. So all that now play with the psyche of our people. But in developed countries where people are seeing things easily, and then the technology is actually playing the role well, you don't manipulate things, you don't manipulate figures.
Okay, thank you so much. And that's Associate Professor of Monetary and Economics, Peter Medee, the head of Department of Economics, University of Port Harcourt. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all of these insights with us.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So as we wrap up, it's clear that businesses have an exciting year ahead. I wish you well. It's filled with opportunities. Take advantage of it and we'll get there. My name is Chioma Ezenwafo. I am at Chioma Ezenwafo on all platforms. Catch me there. Rivers Today is up next. Stay tuned.
You're tuned to your number one talk station, Nigeria Info. Welcome back to the show.
We talk about about everything.
92.3 Nigeria.